this is the problem with media, and this is the problem with this case, is that you can't caricature people based on a couple of cultural markers, which is what happened in this instance. We didn't know a whole lot about this person. We didn't hear from him directly from the very beginning. We knew that he carried an AR-15, which is something that most cosmopolitan liberals would never imagine themselves doing or their kids doing. So they made a lot of assumptions about him that frankly didn't turn out to be correct, and that framed coverage for the entire year of this whole case.
Well, another thing that, I don't know, it might have been disappointing. He didn't in that clip when he's kind of teed up to really let Joe Biden have it, and what he said is fairly restrained, given what figures in the administration, mainstream media figures, have said about him, and he was pretty restrained in response.
He was. I wonder if he's had legal counsel that might have instructed him to be a little bit restrained, because, right. And this is another thing, and I don't want to talk about Joe Biden specifically, but I think any experienced reporter can speak to this. One of the reasons that the use of the term white supremacist was shocking in this case is that as a reporter, I would be afraid to use that word about someone that I didn't have a pretty serious collection of evidence what had beliefs like that, because I would be afraid of libel suits, frankly. Right. And the widespread lack of fear of that, I think, was actually more instructive than anything that Kyle Rittenhouse said or anything about this case. It was a sea change, I think, just in the way that we talk about people.
Every single nation that has once been revered as the shining example of how to beat the virus has eventually been hit. Singapore, Iceland, Germany, and Denmark. No one is being spared. And all of these measures that continually infringe on the rights of the people only backfire with the wave of anger that we're already witnessing in Europe. Where that anger will lead when people have had every ounce of their autonomy taken from them and the virus is still with us, I think politicians should stop and think long and hard about that. The fact is, the vaccines are working as they were intended. They are helping, for a period of time, prevent the most severe outcomes for those who are the most vulnerable, people over the age of 65. As experts, including Fauci, have noted, they wear off against severe disease. So you can't count on them forever. Maybe you're going to be needing some booster shots. But they have bought us some time to develop medications, and that should have been and that time also should have been used to test existing medications that will help prevent COVID from progressing into a severe disease. If we can prevent severe disease, that should be the goal. Pandemic over. The only goal at this stage, after every failed attempt to eradicate the virus by stopping the spread, is to focus on outcomes. And the irony is, in Austria and Germany and all of these countries that are reeling back into restrictions, their death rates are actually much lower than they were last winter. They have vaccinated their most vulnerable, and it's working, but they still seem fixated on stopping the spread. And this fixation on eliminating COVID has caused, in my opinion, political leaders to panic and greatly overstep their bounds. The consequences of this massive government overreach will be felt sooner than later when, one by one, people who believed that these restrictions, mandates, and efforts were the way out see that they aren't. The goal should be obvious at this point. Do what we can to prevent severe disease in those who are the most at risk of terrible outcomes. Most people are not at risk. Maybe we should leave those people alone and instead focus on the people who are at highest risk. So I hate to break it to you guys, but I do think lockdowns and restrictions are possibly coming to the United States. We have always been 1 month behind Europe. And, look, if we do not shift our focus to just outcomes, hospitalizations, deaths, we've got pills coming out from Pfizer, pills from Merck. We've got other pills that, some doctors claim work. So, look, pandemic over at this point. If we can just keep people out of the hospital, we're all going to get COVID, pandemic over. I don't know any other way to do this anymore. What do you guys think?
We should refuse to follow restrictions if they can. People need to stop obeying. Or punish political figures who propose or who implement these things. I completely agree with you, Kim. And in my radar, I talked about how clumsy government efforts to keep people safe, they stick around forever. I talked about the TSA, which just turned 20th anniversary of the TSA. Its 20th birthday was last week, this was supposed to be a temporary new measure, to deal with this threat of terrorism. We still take off our shoes, our belts. We still do these completely pointless things that everyone knows don't make us any safer, and we're still doing that 2 decades later. What I am terrified. Like, what COVID stuff will we still be doing 20 years from now that doesn't matter at all, but the government just kind of has a policy that, yeah, this is what you have to do? So I'm reading from the court filing from the Biden administration. OSHA has continuously monitored the pandemic and previously hoped for, quote, widespread voluntary compliance with safety guidelines to protect against the workplace threat. In recent months, the risk posed by COVID-19 has changed meaningfully, however, and non-regulatory options have proven to be vastly inadequate. So they're kind of saying we
didn't want to have to do this.
We wanted you to do what we wanted you to do without us telling you absolutely have to.
Which I think is true.
Now we're saying you absolutely have to. But I don't know. If non-regulatory options have proven to be vastly inadequate. I mean, pretty much, if you want to protect yourself, you can get a vaccine, you can get a booster shot, and then you're pretty much good to go. It's not totally the case. You can take additional precautions to protect yourself. Is this true, Marissa? That non-regulatory that we can't only the government is our only option for making this pandemic better?
I definitely don't believe that. I think that let's look at the facts here. So, right now the Biden administration doesn't even have 100% of his own White House vaccinated. So I think it's a little hypocritical to think that doing one thing only the government's way is the right way to do it.
Michael, what do you think? Do you my sense is just from a political perspective, the White House is being serious there when they say they would rather not have instituted this mandate because even though it polls well, the opposition to it is intense, and so even if that's a minority of people, their opposition is fierce, kind of like the gun rights issue. So, do you think they're being straightforward there when they say that they reluctantly did this because they see the climbing case counts as a bigger problem than instituting the mandate?
Absolutely. I mean, when you think about it, this is the exact type of policy that gives fodder to kind of the Fox News crowd who wants to talk about government invasion and, the government is infringing on our rights. And I think the White House realizes that, but it's a catch-22. If they don't push for these type of policies, then when case counts start going up again in the winter and there's potentially a new variant, then they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. They're going to get hit either way. And so at least pushing people to get more vaccinations, which that part of this has been successful. Since the first mandate was put in place, now 90% of workplaces have at least one shot. And so, the mandates may not be popular, but in effect, they've worked really well. And there is an exception to that policy that if you don't get a vaccination, then you have to wear a mask and you have to get, I think, either daily or weekly tested. So there are certain exceptions that can be put in place for people who don't want to get vaccinated. But at the end of the day, what this is all about is making sure that, everybody's looking out for each other, because it's not just the person who gets vaccinated that's taking care of themselves.